Careblazer, welcome to this video on 5 surprising symptoms of dementia, part 2. I did a video a while ago on 5 surprising symptoms of dementia, and you guys loved it. So many of you commented with messages of thanks and appreciation that somebody was talking about these symptoms. The symptoms that get talked about most in dementia, like confusion and memory loss and taking a longer time to do things, those are common symptoms, but they're not the only symptoms. And I talk to so many Careblazers who tell me they think like, is something off with my loved one's diagnosis? I don't hear these other symptoms talked about, but my loved one is experiencing them. Are they possibly misdiagnosed, or is my loved one and my situation just so unusual? And the answer is no. It's just that these symptoms don't get talked about a lot. So today, in part 2, I'm going to go over 5 surprising symptoms of dementia. Of course, it is important to know that these symptoms can exist in other conditions. These symptoms do not mean the person has dementia. So if I read a symptom, it doesn't mean everybody who has that symptom has dementia. It just means that that symptom can happen in dementia. That's why a really good assessment and evaluation is always important. And as you'll learn in the 5th surprising symptom, you will learn exactly why none of these symptoms, and not any symptom, is ever an indication of dementia. It's more than that. And in surprising symptom number 4, that is one that I personally deal with every day with my dad, and it can be a frustrating one. So let's see how many of these, if any, your loved one has. Surprising symptom number 1, let's go. It's called Capgras syndrome. Have you ever heard of this? This is a syndrome where the person believes that somebody important in their life has been replaced by an imposter. It's considered a delusion of double, meaning there's like a double person. Typically, this happens with a spouse or somebody who the person with dementia or without who has the syndrome, they have somebody in their life that they have strong emotion toward. And all of a sudden, they believe that that person has been replaced by an imposter, like it's a robot. Like, for instance, let's say my loved one had Capgras syndrome toward me. It would be, I look exactly the same, I sound exactly the same, I am me, but my loved one thinks I am somebody else pretending to be me. And this can be really dangerous because a lot of times it can lead to violence where the person with dementia or whoever has this syndrome thinks that I am so much of an imposter that I'm not who I say I am, that they get physically violent. It's estimated about 1 to 4% of the population has something called Capgras syndrome. So again, this is not just particular to dementia. It can happen in schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders. But does your loved one have this? I've worked with several Careblazers whose loved one has had Capgras syndrome. I've done a whole video on how you can respond and what you can do if your loved one has this condition and thinks you are not who you say you are. I'll be sure to link to that video below. All right, surprising symptom number 2 is quite interesting. It is changes in smell. The loss of ability to identify certain smells. This can actually be quite dangerous because it would make the person with dementia unable to smell if maybe there's a fire starting, the smell of gas, to smell when food has gone bad. But importantly, the loss of being able to identify smell is associated with Alzheimer's disease. So there's been many studies that show the worse the smelling ability, the higher their risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And people who have mild cognitive impairment, those who have worse smelling ability, are more likely to go on and get Alzheimer's disease. Here's an article that shows olfactory deficits in patients with mild cognitive impairment predict Alzheimer's disease at follow-up. And this study, olfaction in patients with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, showed that the ability to discriminate between odors and the ability to identify certain odors were better able to determine early Alzheimer's than even standard neuropsychological testing. So smell changes, discriminating between smells, identifying smells, that is often a change that presents even before other common symptoms of dementia. Have you ever noticed that your loved one's smell started to diminish, or they had a hard time distinguishing between smells early on in the disease process? Surprising symptom number 3, age. We often think about dementia being a condition of older age, and absolutely, age is the biggest risk factor for developing dementia. The older you are, the higher your risk. However, there are people who get dementia at a younger age, even as early as 50, 40, 30. And so the biggest challenge in these situations is that when a younger person starts to show signs of dementia, it takes them longer to get a diagnosis, longer for the healthcare professionals to figure out what's going on, possibly delaying treatment. And on top of all that, once they do finally get a diagnosis, they often don't qualify for the services and resources that are available to most people with dementia because they are not yet 65. So some resources, help for caregivers and help for the person with dementia, sometimes are not even given. People don't qualify unless they're 65 years and older. So you have the caregivers and person with dementia going through all of the challenges, yet with limited resources because they're younger. Technically speaking, anybody under the age of 65 falls into the category of younger onset dementia. This study was done in the United Kingdom, but what they found was that the prevalence of dementia with onset between the ages of 30 and 65 was 54 per 100,000 and 98 per 100,000 between the ages of 45 and 65 years old. When we think about younger onset dementia, about 34% of the younger cases are falling into the Alzheimer's disease category, so that's the majority of them, followed by other, then very closely by vascular dementia, frontotemporal alcoholic dementia, and dementia with Lewy bodies. Was your loved one under the age of 65 when they were diagnosed, or do you suspect that they had dementia prior to the age of 65? You would technically fall under this category of younger onset dementia. Next surprising symptom of dementia is what I'm calling random remembering. This is a situation where the person with dementia can remember the most random details, yet they don't remember other things that you would consider really important. So for example, my father can't remember my birthday, my dog's name, what I do for a living, where I went on vacation, the last time I visited him. He can't remember any of that, but he can remember the number of the print edition on a certain photo he had in his home, or he can remember what a random neighbor said to him 3 weeks ago. It doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but it's just a symptom I think that's worth mentioning because it can be quite frustrating for us to experience because it's like, what in the world? You can't remember something that you might think is really important, but to them, it just doesn't stick. But some random piece of information, they seem to be able to pull it out like it's no problem at all. Does your loved one do this? As a family member, this can be a hard one. Okay, and finally, the last surprising symptom I want to talk about is no specific symptom can tell you the stage that somebody is in. I receive this question a lot here on the YouTube channel. They'll say, my loved one is getting lost in familiar places, sometimes has difficulty with their words, and can't remember to pay their bills. What stage of dementia is my loved one in? It doesn't work that way. There is no specific symptom that will tell you what stage somebody is in. There's not even a combination of a certain symptoms that tell you what stage somebody's in. It's really a full picture involving their thinking and their physical functioning. And it requires multiple pieces of information to come together. So for all of you commenting and asking, here are some symptoms, what stage are they in? It's important to know that in most cases never going to be able to be answered without more information. And I've done several videos on the stages of dementia. I'll link to those below so that you can watch them and actually go through and determine which stage your loved one is in based on those videos. There are also specific tools, measuring tools to determine what stage somebody is in. But just know that the majority of the time, saying 1 or 2 or 3 symptoms is not enough to get the stage that somebody is in. Careblazer, this is part 2 of maybe surprising symptoms of dementia. Did your loved one have any? How many out of the 5? 0? 1? Anybody have all 5 symptoms? I certainly hope not. Capgras syndrome is such a hard one for family members and the person with dementia to experience. But If this is helpful for you and you would like to know even more surprising symptoms of dementia, because yes, there are more than this, let me know and I can do a part 3 follow-up to this series. Sending you so much love. All the links to the articles I've mentioned are below. Links to the videos I've referenced are below. And for those of you who want to join our community of change makers, where we take this information, but we also come together to support one another, offer feedback, information, life-changing tips to one another, and do so in a safe community with access to dementia experts, there's also a link below this video. You can check that out as well. Sending you love.
Also, Nico gets a belly rub for every person who subscribes from this video. So if you haven't already, click the red subscribe button. It's totally free, and Nico says thank you very much.